I found someone worth my time. My name is Nina Whitmore, and at 44, I'm a commercial architect in Savannah, Georgia, sitting in my home office, staring at an email from my husband of 12 years. Daniel was supposed to be on a business trip in Denver. The timestamp showed 11:20 p.m. his time. I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. Attached was a blurry photo of him and some woman with dark curls on a hotel balcony, city lights behind them, glasses of wine in hand. His smile was different than any he'd given me in years. I closed my laptop and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stared out at the backyard we'd redesigned together 3 summers ago. The stone path I'd laid while he planted hydrangeas along the edges. All that work for a home he apparently had no intention of coming back to. That money 58700 from my late Aunt Marion wasn't just cash. It represented the woman who'd taken me in after my parents died when I was 14, who'd worked double shifts at the hospital to put me through college, who'd left everything to me with one simple note: build something that lasts. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts asking if I'd seen the email. Just silence, like he'd already moved on to his new life. The signs had been there for months. Daniel's business trips had become more frequent. 2 days became 4, became week-long excursions. His phone stayed face down on tables. Passwords changed. Conversations shortened. 3 months ago, he'd asked odd questions about the inheritance, where exactly the money was, which accounts, whether we should diversify where it was held. I'd nodded, said I'd think about it. I reopened the laptop, read the email again. Noticed he hadn't even bothered with a greeting or my name, just the declaration and the theft. I typed 6 words in response: thanks for letting me know. Then I closed the laptop, finished my water, and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a long day, but sitting alone in that king-size bed, I realized something that should have bothered me, but didn't. I slept better, knowing he wasn't coming home. What Daniel didn't know was that I'd sensed something wrong months ago. The inheritance had never been where he thought it was, and his attempt to take it had just given me everything I needed. I met Daniel 15 years ago at an industry conference in Charlotte. He was launching his consulting firm, looking for architects to design his office space. I was 5 years into my career, hungry for projects that weren't just office buildings and parking structures. We married within 3 years, built a life in Savannah where my firm had its headquarters, bought the Craftsman on Victory Drive with the wraparound porch he'd always wanted. No kids his choice. The business is my baby, he'd say. I understood. My buildings were mine. For 8 years things worked. I designed. He built his brand. We traveled. We hosted dinner parties. We looked good on paper and in person. Then, my Aunt Marion got sick. Cancer, fast and merciless. I took a 6-month partial leave to care for her in Atlanta. Daniel visited twice. Hospitals depress me, he explained. I didn't push it. When Marion died, she left everything to me. The money surprised me. I'd had no idea she'd invested so carefully over the years. Daniel seemed surprised too, suddenly interested in our financial planning in ways he'd never been. We should put it toward expanding the business, he suggested one night over dinner. His business, he meant. I need to think about what Marion would want, I said. That was the first crack, small but visible. Others followed. Daniel started traveling more for client meetings. His calls became shorter, often with voices in the background that went quiet when I asked who he was with. Our neighbor Lena stopped by one afternoon while Daniel was at a conference in Denver. Saw someone dropping him off last week, she mentioned casually. Late, wasn't it? Thought you were out of town. I had been. 3-day conference in Boston. I thanked her for the homemade bread she'd brought over. Didn't ask questions, just filed it away. Then came the password changes. Banking apps locked when they'd never been before. Conversations about finances that ended abruptly when I asked specific questions. One night, I found him on the phone in the backyard, voice low, laughing in ways he didn't laugh with me anymore. Just Mark from the office, he said, coming inside. Mark, who'd left the firm 8 months earlier. I nodded, didn't correct him, just watched as he poured himself more wine and changed the subject. The foundation was cracking beneath us, and only one of us was being honest about it. 2 weeks before Daniel left for what would be his final trip, my firm's financial advisor Jerry called. Someone's been trying to access information about your trust accounts, he said. Using your personal information but not passing the security protocols. Which accounts? I asked. though I already knew. The inheritance funds. They tried using the last four of your social but couldn't answer the security questions. I thanked him, hung up, and sat at my desk for a long time. That night, Daniel asked if we could simplify our accounts. It's silly to have so many separate logins and passwords, he said, not meeting my eyes. We should consolidate everything. You're probably right, I said. I'll talk to Jerry about it. The next day, I drove to Atlanta, met with Rita Wallace, my aunt's attorney for 20 years, and now mine, explained my concerns. Without emotion or accusation, just facts, your aunt was wise to suggest the irrevocable trust structure, Rita said after I finished. The money is protected regardless of what happens in your marriage, and if someone tried to move those funds without authorization, Rita's expression hardened. That would be attempted financial fraud with clear legal consequences, I nodded. Let's document everything. And I want a monitoring system that alerts us to any attempts to access, move, or change anything related to the trust. When I got home, Daniel had packed for his trip. He kissed me briefly before leaving, already distant. I might extend this one, he said at the door. Really dive deep into the client work. I helped load his bags into his car, watched him drive away, went back inside, and opened my laptop. I didn't snoop through his emails or texts, didn't call his friends or check his location. I simply opened our shared cloud storage where we kept household documents in a folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we'd discussed starting this year. I found what I was looking for, documents he'd forgotten to move or delete. Screenshots of my accounts, copies of statements, notes about transfer protocols, a photo of a whiteboard with figures my inheritance amount minus 20%, with the note transfer fee explanation. He'd been planning this for months. I closed the folder, walked through our house with its carefully chosen furniture and artwork that told the story of who we pretended to be, and felt a strange calm settle over me. The betrayal wasn't shocking. What surprised me was my own response. Not rage or grief, but clarity. For the first time in years, I saw our marriage for what it had become, a transaction he was now terminating because something more profitable had come along. I slept in the guest room that night, started making calls the next morning. By the time his email arrived 5 days later, I had already set everything in motion. After receiving Daniel's email, I waited exactly 24 hours before making my first move. No emotional response, no desperate calls or texts, just methodical steps. First, I contacted Jerry and Rita, forwarding them Daniel's email with a simple note, documentation requested. Both confirmed receipt. Neither needed further explanation. Then, I called Thomas Webb, a divorce attorney Rita had recommended months earlier during one of our hypothetical conversations. His secretary scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. By noon, Daniel had texted, "Did you get my email?" I responded, "Yes. That's all you have to say?" He wrote back minutes later. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to Thomas's office downtown, where Rita joined us by video call. The attempted transfer creates a paper trail, Thomas explained, reviewing the documents Rita had sent over. There are multiple elements that work in your favor. The funds were inherited, never commingled with marital assets, properly maintained in a trust structure, and he has now openly admitted to attempting unauthorized access. What's next? I asked. File for divorce immediately, citing financial misconduct. Georgia is in a no-fault state when fraud is involved. I signed the paperwork before leaving his office. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Daniel's name on the screen. "You're being childish," he said when I answered. No greeting. No "how are you?" This doesn't have to be difficult. I agree, I said. Then let's be adults about this. The money is already moved. Fighting it will just drain more through legal fees. Where are you staying? I asked, changing the subject. He paused, thrown off balance. What does that matter? Just curious where home is now. Nina, focus. We need to discuss the financial arrangements. I'm having my lawyer draw up settlement papers. It's better for both of us to keep this clean. Who's your lawyer? I asked. David Lawrence. He's already reviewing everything. I wrote down the name. That's helpful. Thank you. Are you even listening? This doesn't have to be difficult. You said that already. I kept my voice neutral. I appreciate your concern for making this easy. Another pause. What are you doing? Nothing yet. Getting used to the idea, I guess. I could hear him relax on the other end, misreading my calm as resignation. It's for the best, he said, softening his tone. We've been moving in different directions for years. This is cleaner than dragging it out. You're right, I agreed. Cleaner is better. After we hung up, I called Thomas back and gave him David Lawrence's information. Then I sent a single text to Daniel, taking some time to process. We'll reach out when I'm ready to discuss details. His response came immediately. Don't wait too long. Papers will be ready by Friday. Friday 3 days away. Perfect timing. ATPM Rita called. The trust company has recorded 3 separate attempts to initiate transfers from the trust accounts today, all properly documented and blocked. And the monitoring system captured everything: IP addresses, login attempts, timestamps. The access location matches where the email originated from. Denver, not Phoenix. She paused. There's more. The system flagged suspicious activity from last month. Someone exported account details and transfer protocols while logged in. Through your home network. We have timestamps and device identifiers. I thanked her and hung up. Walked through the empty house that now felt more like evidence than a home. In the kitchen, I opened the bottle of 20-year-old scotch we'd been saving for our 15th anniversary. Poured 2 fingers into a glass. Daniel thought he'd set the trap. He had no idea he'd walked right into one himself. The next morning, David Lawrence called. His tone was professionally cautious. Miss Whitmore, I'm representing your husband in your separation. He's indicated you're amenable to a straightforward settlement. Is that what he said? A slight hesitation. He mentioned you understood the situation. Which situation would that be specifically? Another pause. The division of assets, including recent inheritance funds. Has he shown you documentation of these funds? He's provided statements, he said carefully. Recent ones from approximately 3 months ago. I made a note. And transfer confirmations? He's indicated those are forthcoming from the bank. I see. I kept my voice neutral. Has he also mentioned the structure of the inheritance? The irrevocable trust established by my late aunt? The legal impossibility of what he's claiming to have done? Silence. Mr. Lawrence, I suggest you verify the information you've been given before proceeding. My attorney will send relevant documentation to your office today. After hanging up, I drove to Brightstone Bank, where Daniel and I had kept our personal accounts for years. The manager, Harold, had handled our mortgage refinancing 2 years earlier. I need to review recent activity on all joint accounts, I explained after he welcomed me into his office. Harold pulled up our information. His expression shifted as he scrolled through the screens. There have been significant withdrawals, he said, over the past 3 months. How significant? He turned the monitor toward me. Regular transfers from our joint account to one. I didn't recognize small at first. 2,000, 2,000, 3,500, then escalating. The most recent, $47,000 2 weeks ago. This receiving account, I asked, pointing to the number. Is it with Brightstone? Harold checked. No, it's external. Northern Lakes Credit Union. I'd never heard of it. Can you print the transaction history for the past 6 months? While waiting for the printouts, I received a text from Thomas Lawrence requesting urgent meeting. Tone significantly changed. By the time I returned to Thomas's office, the picture was becoming clearer. The Northern Lakes account had been opened 8 months ago in Daniel's name only. The address listed was an apartment in Denver. Total withdrawals from our joint accounts, 17800. He's been building a new life for a while, Thomas observed. While still having access to mine, I added, we were reviewing the bank records when Thomas's assistant announced David Lawrence was on the line. I've received the trust documentation, Lawrence said, his voice tight. My client may have misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation, including his ability to access or transfer those funds. That appears to be the case, Thomas replied. Given this new information, I believe it would be beneficial for all parties to discuss a revised approach. My client has already filed for divorce, citing financial misconduct, Thomas said. The documentation speaks for itself. After the call ended, Thomas looked at me. He'll drop Daniel as a client by end of day. No legitimate attorney wants to be associated with this. What about the money he actually did take from the joint accounts? We'll include it in the filing. Document everything. Let him explain to a judge why he established a hidden residence and systematically drained marital assets. I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, planned. Over months while he slept beside me, ate across from me, made plans with me. There's one more thing, I said. I need to know who she is. Not for confrontation, not even for the divorce proceedings. I just needed to understand the full scope of what I'd missed while building what I thought was a life together. Thomas nodded. I'll have someone look into it. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier holding an envelope. Delivery? For Nina Whitmore, he said. Inside was a letter from David Lawrence formally withdrawing as Daniel's legal representation, with copies sent to both Daniel and the court. Attached was a note from Thomas. First domino. My phone lit up minutes later. Daniel calling. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before sending a text. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond. While eating a sandwich at the kitchen counter, I received an email from Rita with a subject line that simply read, Update, the trust company had completed their investigation into the access attempts. They documented multiple unauthorized attempts over 3 months, all captured in detailed logs with IP addresses and timestamps. The report was attached, along with confirmation they'd referred the matter to their legal department for potential criminal investigation. No action required from you at this time, Rita wrote. But be aware, this path is now open. I forwarded everything to Thomas. Just after 9:00 p.m., another text from Daniel. We need to talk now, I replied. Through your new attorney, when you have one, you've completely overreacted. I was angry when I sent that email. I didn't actually move anything. That's not what the access logs show. A long pause before his next message. What access logs? Instead of answering, I sent one question. Who is she? 20 minutes passed. Finally, this isn't about her. Name? Another long pause. Claire Bennett. But she's not important. She's just a friend who's helping me through this. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I didn't respond further. Instead, I searched the name, found a Claire Bennett, a financial consultant in Denver, former colleague at Daniel's old firm. LinkedIn showed she'd left corporate finance 2 years ago to pursue more meaningful work. The next morning, I met with Lena, our neighbor, the woman you saw dropping Daniel off. I began. Would you recognize her again? Lena nodded slowly. Tall, dark hair, drives a black Lexus. I showed her the photo from Daniel's email. This her? She squinted at the image. Yeah, that's her. She was here maybe 5, 6 times while you were traveling. I thanked her, asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement. She agreed without hesitation. At 11:00 a.m., Thomas called. We've got a complication. Daniel's hired Philip Barnes. Barnes had a reputation for aggressive divorce litigation. Expensive but effective. He's requested an emergency hearing to contest the financial misconduct claim. Thomas continued. Says his client has evidence all financial decisions were discussed and agreed upon. When's the hearing? Monday morning. 3 days away. I thought about the apartment in Denver. The Northern Lakes account. The woman named Claire, who'd been in my house while I was away. Let's give Barnes something to think about, I said. That afternoon, Thomas delivered a package to Barnes's office containing copies of everything. The trust access logs, the bank records showing systematic withdrawals, the apartment lease in Denver, Lena's notarized statement about Claire's visits, and screenshots from Daniel's home renovation ideas folder showing his notes on how to access my accounts. By 5:00 p.m., Thomas received a call from Barnes requesting an urgent meeting to discuss settlement options. He's seen enough. Thomas told me afterward. Offered a clean split. Daniel keeps what he already took. Makes no further claims. You keep everything else, including the house and full inheritance. Counter, I said. He returns half of what he took from joint accounts and signs a non-disclosure agreement. I don't pursue the fraud angle. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You could get more. I don't want more. I want done. The morning of what would have been our emergency hearing, Daniel and his attorney arrived at the courthouse to find Thomas waiting with a settlement agreement already prepared. No Barnes, no judge, no public spectacle. I waited in the consultation room while Thomas explained the terms. Daniel would transfer $89,275, half the money taken from joint accounts, back within 24 hours. He would make no claims against the inheritance or any other assets. He would sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing him from discussing our marriage or divorce with anyone. In exchange, I would not pursue any fraud charges related to the Attempted theft of trust funds. Through the glass walls, I saw his face as Thomas handed over the evidence file: photographs, statements, account logs. His expression shifted from defiance to shock to something like defeat. He glanced toward the room where I sat, then quickly looked away. Barnes reviewed everything, leaning close to whisper in his ear. Daniel nodded slowly. 10 minutes later, they entered the room. "My client accepts the terms," Barnes stated formally. Thomas slid the agreement across the table. Daniel signed. Without reading it, his handwriting shaky but determined. I signed my portion, then slid a separate envelope across to him. "What's this?" he asked. The first words he'd spoken. "The passwords," I said. "To the cloud storage, house alarm, everything else you might need to get whatever you left behind." His eyes finally met mine, searching for anger or triumph, finding neither. He looked more lost than I'd ever seen him. "It was never about the money," I said quietly. "That would have been simpler." Barnes touched his elbow, guiding him to stand. Daniel clutched the envelope as they left, never looking back. 6 months later, I sold the house on Victory Drive. Too many empty rooms, too many memories to paint over. The new owners, a young family with twins, loved the wraparound porch and the hydrangeas along the stone path. I moved to a loft downtown, walking distance to my firm's office. Bought less furniture, kept fewer things. Rita helped me restructure my aunt's inheritance into a foundation supporting architectural scholarships for kids who'd lost parents. Its first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from South Georgia, whose essay about designing spaces that heal resonated with the selection committee. "Marion would have loved her," Rita said when we awarded the scholarship. I thought about my aunt, often her practical wisdom, her insistence that creating something worthwhile required equal parts vision and vigilance. One afternoon, collecting mail in the lobby of my building, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a check for exactly $89,275 and a brief note, the rest of what I owed, not just the money. No signature. None needed. That evening, I walked down to the riverfront where Daniel and I had once talked about opening a joint venture, a consulting space I would design, he would operate. A dream that had died long before our marriage had. I sat on a bench watching cargo ships pass, the check still in my pocket. Tomorrow, I would deposit it into the foundation account. Another scholarship, another chance to build something that might last. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. "Dinner still on for 7. Bringing that architect I mentioned." I glanced at my watch. Just enough time to walk home, change, and head to the restaurant. Just enough time to decide to say yes to whatever came next. On my way, I texted back and stood to face the evening. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's rebuilding.